Catherine, how are you? Good
Good.
evening.
How are you, Luciana?
I'm doing
I know you
well.
had, I know you had a hard day at work before all this, so I
I
appreciate
know.
your going the extra mile as always.
Always, always. So tonight's show is episode 27, Stop Feeding the Tapeworm. Stop feeding the tapeworm. That was a good
I like
title.
referring to them that way. They're not as intimidating if you think of them that way instead of calling them, the big bad psychopaths or the predators or the
Right.
any of the
Yeah, yeah.
other things we could use. Um, Yeah, I wanted to say I'm just going to cover, kind of broadly, and I'm going to be counting on my guests to fill in a lot of the gaps in my technical knowledge of a lot of the areas of our lives that we need to extract from the corporate cabal. And it's a really big undertaking, obviously. But there's a lot of us. So,
There
many
is.
hands make light work. So,
It
um,
is.
but I just wanted to, because the areas that I wanted to cover, are the, the bare essentials really for a decent life and for pure survival. For pure survival, I mean, what's the first thing you think of? Water, right? We're not going to survive very long without water. Even food you can survive without for a month, but you need water. Um, and I just want to thank our Heavenly Father for that gift and to remind everyone that Jesus told the woman at the well, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Revelation 21:6. Then he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give to the one who thirsts from the spring of the water of life without cost. Revelation 22:17, the Spirit and the bride say, come. And let the one who hears say, come. And let the one who is thirsty come. Let the one who wishes take the water of life without cost. And then finally, John 4:14, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him shall never thirst, but the water that I will give him will become in him a well of water springing up to eternal life.
Amen.
Amen. So I wanted to address water since it's so basic, and there's probably a lot about water that we don't know much about. And whatever it is that's coming out of our taps is probably not anything remotely resembling the living water of life we would like to think it would be. Um, and along those lines, I was, well, first of all, there's a link. This is the greencoast.org link that dispels any notion, and I think we're going to hear more about it, that water's becoming scarce. That's the next lie. And so, anyway, if you want to put that up quickly,
Oh,
that's
which one, Catherine?
greencoast.org, water renewable.
Okay.
And then there's another one while you're there that I really wanted to get into more deeply, and that is the link to the Dr. Hula Clark book. And, and that is
Okay, we'll show the first one. Okay.
yeah. So yeah, contrary to the next scam, water is a renewable, and actually so is oil. And maybe Ron Armstrong can tell us a little bit more about that when he comes on and wanted to remind people, if we want to be freed of them, stop our need of them. So we've got to be developing our parallel economies. Okay, so back to water. It is renewable, and but what it has become in the hands of these predators is an instrument of death, disease, and dementia. And so if we, and I'm wondering if my link to the Dr. Clark book, I know I sent it to you, but I also put it in my own notes. And that seems to be disappearing.
Yeah, I can only show one at a time, though.
Yeah, we can get past this one. I just wanted to show people the link to it, and if they want to get further information about that, that's where it is. Okay, so probably a lot of us are okay. Yeah, the next one would be the Book of Cure. The cure for AIDS. Yeah.
Are we going through this renewable one, or you were just showing it?
I'm just showing it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I'll take this one down. Which one did you want to show?
The Book of A Cure for all Diseases.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, and that on page that's an ebook available online, and now even before we get into that, let's be aware that common contaminants in our drinking water are getting worse. Are getting worse all the time. One of the and then she gets into exactly what they are. One deliberate effort that was made to increase the toxicity of water, municipal water, has been, and I'm going to have to be careful how I say this because I have a feeling that YouTube is going to be real obsessive, like they were about the injectable potion that we used to talk about sometimes. And so if they have an idea that so I'm going to refer to this this element and the compounds that are made from it as what it's called in chemistry. The abbreviation for it is just the letter F. F as in Frank, but it's also FLOURIDE. All right. So now that's the compound that is made from the element, which is FLOURINE. It's one of the halogens. It's in the same chemical group as chlorine, bromine, and iodine. But it's highly toxic. It was originally used as a rat poison, and it's a byproduct of aluminum manufacturing. And there's a documentary about the whole history of how this poison was sold to us as a way of having healthy teeth. Okay. And you can, if you still want it, there's plenty of toothpaste out there that contain it. You really like the idea of being poisoned. But make no mistake, that's what this F thing is. It causes neurological damage. And actually, one of the studies that they did to show that it was supposed to be so great for the teeth was they had two groups, one that worked at an F manufacturing plant, and another group that didn't. And the group that worked at the F manufacturing plant generally had no teeth. Their teeth were falling out. Okay. But the results of the experiment, the study, were that the people who worked in the fluoride in the F plant were had far fewer cavities than the than the ones who didn't work in the F,
Wow.
because they
Wow.
didn't have teeth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they actually did that, and there was like one study, and from that they, corporate policy emerged. But it has other characteristics on brain function. Now there's an internet theory out there, and Jesse Ventura has promoted this a bit. I don't know if there's any part of this that is true. You hear oftentimes that Hitler was put the F chemical into it's a compound in the drinking water. But I think the story has been perverted from whether he put it in the drinking water of the population to make them more docile and more accepting of his programs. But the stories change into, no, he put it in the drinking water at the camps, which really doesn't make sense. So that's the second version, is the version that gets loudly and hysterically rebutted all the time on social media and elsewhere. So I don't know if either story has any basis. So, but the serious work that was done about putting this into drinking water happened, as I recall, in Muskingum, Michigan, and in another city in Michigan. So it was, the serious work was done in the United States. And then from there, it spread, and I think it's federal corporate policy now to put this F toxin in all drinking water.
Yeah.
So,
and of course, the people believe whatever they're told.
right. And, in case that's not enough, of course, you can go to your dentist and you can get a twofer, two toxins, maybe in one treatment. You can get the F chemical, and he'll give you some to take home too. And he'll fill your cavitations with mercury amalgam. Okay. But he won't call it mercury. He'll call it silver. Silver. That sounds benign enough.
Sounds
So,
a little prettier.
yeah. I have a cousin who's a dentist, and I confronted him because he had done some dental work on me. I confronted him. Did you put mercury amalgam in my mouth? And oh, darling, I wouldn't harm you. You mean silver? Yeah, right. Whatever. Anyway, I went to a biological dentist and I had it all pulled out. I would caution people not to, if you have
a biological dentist.
Yeah, go to a biological dentist.
Oh wow, I never knew that.
Yeah,
I'll have to do a little research on that.
Yeah, because what will happen is, and I know people who have gone to just regular dentists who will say, "Sure, I'll scrape that stuff out of there for you," and then and I brought my daughter to one of those, thinking, well, a dentist is a dentist, right? No, and she came out of that office and she had chunks of that stuff on her tongue.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, go to somebody who knows what the heck they're doing. There's one in the north of Columbus I know of. If anybody wants a referral. Um, anyway, I don't get anything for any of that, but I would definitely go to a biological dentist. Um, but back to the issue of water and what else is in it besides the intentionally placed F chemical. And that's where the what you've got posted up there will will get into. There is all municipal water is bleached, but there's different kinds of bleach. And one kind of bleach is now understand when she was writing this was in the 1990s, and things may be a little different.
Are you talking about in the Book of Cure?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, it is. And around about, say, page 58 is where she starts talking about carbon filters and just the whole. There's all kinds of ways that your drinking water, or even the water that you're showering in, washing dishes in, maybe cooking with, um, is going to be contaminated. And and she says, beware of, on page 58, beware of carbon filters. Also, beware of copper plumbing, galvanized plumbing, and copper plumbing. The those metals leach into the water, and water softeners, and hot water heaters. Yeah. Uh, and never use hot water from the faucet in cooking. And there's reasons for that, because there's a metal element that heats the water that you don't want to be exposed to. But the cold side gets contaminated as well. I want to mention in an aside that the state of the art filter for municipal water, and one of our people has it, but I wonder about its effectiveness, is the Berkey filter. And now, at the time that Dr. Clark was writing, and currently, I think, the standard is NSF bleach to be used uh, to disinfect drinking water. And the NSF stands for National Sanitation Foundation. Well, the Berkey and National Sanitation Foundation is tied into EPA and FDA. The main problem, okay, there's been some recent litigation over the Berkey filter, and I don't really have an opinion about whether Berkey was unfairly targeted or if there's a problem there that people should be aware of. Apparently, there were no allegations that water that was run through a Berkey filter had become unsafe. Of course, these are allegations from people who are producing unsafe water to begin with. So hopefully the Berkey didn't make it worse. They didn't say that it did. So they didn't really have a claim against Berkey. They were just mad that Berkey didn't pay for the NSF inspection, which was apparently extremely expensive, prohibitively expensive. It's kind of like analogous to if you want food that is certified organic, what does that really mean? It probably means that the manufacturer has connections to the entity, the corporation that puts the certified organic seal on the product. Does that mean that they have necessarily tested that for every forever chemical that might be in your food? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. They will check for everything that's on their list and no more. Well, apparently, according to Berkey, the Berkey company, they did not do the NSF Foundation inspection because they thought it wasn't rigorous enough. They did something far more rigorous that tested for more chemicals, and they I think filed a lawsuit of their own against Fraud and Death Administration and others for giving them a bad name. So I don't know. One of the things that Dr. Clark would always say about to be concerned about with a filter, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, with a Brita, I became deathly ill with water filtered through a Brita filter, which I thought, well, it's filtered. It should be good water. And I could just tell as soon as it hit my stomach, it was horrible. I ended up losing 40 pounds. I didn't need to lose. I thought I was going to die. I was being poisoned. So not necessarily from the Brita, but from what the city of Chillicothe municipal water had in it. So that sort of gets into the two different kinds of bleach that Dr. Clark talks about. And this is crucial for which kind contains the cancer compound, the elements. And if you go to that, and it's along about pages, okay. First of all, you go to page 58. Here's the connection between toxins. She says, and I believe it. Here's the deal with the big C. It's caused by at least one type of parasite, since we're on the subject of parasites and tapeworms. And this parasite is called the Fasciolopsis busci. And on pages, it's computer page 58.
This is page 58 in the book here.
Yeah, okay, it should have. It's computer page 58. Let me get on. It's actually page 33 of the book. Yes, that's it. That's it. So I can see it better on my screen. Yeah. All right. So it tells about the life cycle. I mean, I know this is gross, but it tells about the life cycle of this cancer-producing parasite. That's not to say that you can have this parasite and not develop cancer. It takes more than just that. But the problem comes in when the parasite doesn't leave your body. And when it doesn't leave your body in the normal elimination process, and it starts to stick around, and it starts to go into its life cycles, and then those daughter cells start to go through tissue and spread into other organs, that you develop problems. But here's the thing, and she had said there's only two causes of diseases. One is toxins, she doesn't talk about malnutrition, but that's a big one too. Toxins and parasitism. Well, the two go together. You can't, parasites would not be a problem if the organism wasn't already under attack by toxins. Parasites only attack sick organisms. So, and they're not bothered particularly by, the toxicity. A lot of what they consume that's toxic to us is food to them.
Hmm.
So, okay, then going to the next page, 59, she says, well, what makes the byproducts of the life cycle of this parasite, and there are many other parasites besides this one that cause other conditions, and it seems that parasites have their own favorite organ to go to. Anyway, the big problem is when you've got some kind of a propyl alcohol as a solvent in connection with, if that's present in the body. Well, how would that become present in the body? Well, one way is, and she talks about it somewhere in this book, there is a federal regulation, cabal regulation, that requires all food processing equipment to be rinsed with propyl alcohol. Okay, no provision for rinsing the residue off, though.
And
So
I put the link for anyone wanting it. I put the link to the book in the comments on YouTube.
Okay, hopefully they won't ban it, but they've been really
they
bad
will.
about it.
They will.
Probably so. But if anybody, wants to have further information about that, I'm just grateful that it's still on available online.
Mhm.
And I've read about 2 or 3 of her books, and I have that one in hard copy, and I have one a sequel to it too. One of the sequels.
Can you see the chat, Catherine? I didn't know if you could read it.
Oh, let me get back to it. I'm so sorry, Keith. Your computer's compromised. Michael's battery went dead.
Oh.
Please read Brenda Watson, The Brain Gut Connection. Yeah. Okay. I'll bring Ron on because this is I would like for him to talk about the alternatives to the current electric grid that we're subjected to.
Hi, Ron. How are you?
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Ron. Like smart meters, for example.
Smart meters. I think the way we're going to have to address the smart meters.
I can address the problems with smart meters, but I think the ultimate solution is going to be to get out
Get
of
away from them.
Yeah, and so
Just
you would be the one
disconnect from it.
Right. What's the best way to disconnect from it? Is that feasible for people?
Well, I'll tell you what. Something we just talked about right off the bat. I spent the last week. I like to revisit some things I've looked into in the past, and I think you and I talked at one point about Joseph Newman. I think you remember me bringing his name up.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a man who in 1982 created a device that you could basically have it sitting outside your house that generate all the power you'd ever need. It basically, the idea behind it, you've actually seen several inventors that invented these things. They're called motor generators. The motors operate. they require a certain amount of energy to run, but produce more than what's being required to operate them. Okay, most of these things are in one instance. Joseph Newman's motor was putting out 24 times what it was taking in to operate it.
Now, to actually use that, you would have to really be using direct current, right?
You could set it up for direct current. I mean, to my knowledge, I think you can run a house off of direct current, but it's really not that hard to take direct current and convert it to alternating current. You just need an inverter. So I mean, you could do it. I mean, you could pretty much set it up whichever way was convenient for you.
Well, you say that. I had a kind of a very expensive, unhappy experience with inverters, and
yeah, that happens.
Yeah, and with no solution, absolutely no solution, and lost $10,000. Okay.
Wow.
So I'm not,
okay.
so I'm not
tell you what,
real happy.
I'll do my level best not to ever put you through that. I usually don't.
It was a big experiment with wind. Okay.
Oh, okay. I got to tell you, if I was going to run my house off of wind, I would probably want to do that somewhere in Hawaii or somewhere where you've got a good supply of wind to keep things running.
This was not in Ohio. It was a place that got a lot of wind. That wasn't the issue.
Okay.
It was the inverter. The problem was in the inverter box.
Oh, okay.
Which came from China, and they weren't going to replace it. It never worked. I think it worked for one day, and that was it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well,
so I thought, well, okay, maybe I'll just operate only with direct current. Is that
well, you could do that. I mean, to my knowledge, I mean, I know at one time you could buy appliances for direct current.
Yes.
But it may be a matter of, I'll tell you what, I have to investigate that a little bit more. If I didn't, but yeah, I mean, I've seen, I used to work in Amish country, and the Amish use a lot of direct current appliances and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
we could take a lot of instruction from them, couldn't we?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. on many levels, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, where we started out with Joseph Newman, there's also a gentleman named Tom Green. And here's something that's a little more low tech, but his thought process was simply return to using steam. And he developed a lot of very efficient steam engines, and basically steam generators are pretty simple. I know a while back I read an article about someone whose power was knocked out in Florida, and this guy was a mechanical engineer. And he took a chainsaw and he had some pipe fittings, and he converted that chainsaw engine to run on steam. And an engine that small produces a lot more power if you're having a head of steam applied to it. You typically think of 50 cc engines about 2-3 horsepower, but you throw steam onto it and it makes a lot more. So basically, long story short, he was the only guy in the neighborhood with power. So that's another thought process. I mean,
he still had to have a source of gasoline for this.
Right. Well, here's the thing to think about. This was Florida. If you think about it, after a hurricane, there's a lot of debris available. if you wanted to run have like a wood-fired boiler.
Yeah.
So
run a chainsaw with wood heat with wood.
No, you take you're actually putting steam into the spark plug aperture and driving the piston up and down with steam pressure. It's basically you basically made an air engine something that could run off compressed air. It works in the same on the same principle.
Okay.
But I don't know if I explained that clear enough, but there's a way to modify a two-stroke engine so to run off of steam. Even it may only be a temporary stopgap thing or an emergency thing, but at any rate, the point I was making is we wouldn't really have to dip into black bag technology to be self-sufficient. There's a way to do all these things without,
Oh, that's really good to know. You ought to, are there other people that have these kind of skills? I know you talked about being able to manufacture an automobile for about $500.
right. Well, here's the thing: you'd want to your platform would base. I think we discussed this previously. Would be something like we talked about Henry Ford's quadricycle. A lot of people think of a car as something that's 4,000 pounds and is a rolling living room on wheels. But if you look at it, the automobiles that we started out with weren't anything like that. I'm not saying those vehicles don't have some form of utility to offer us, but basic transportation, yeah, I think we could. Yeah, okay. Here's something to consider. If you look at a 4x8 sheet of plywood, 4 feet by 8 feet, 96 inches is your typical wheelbase for a car.
Okay.
60 inches is your typical track width. So you could base a platform off of something as simple as a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and making something like I said, Henry Ford's quadricycle.
Okay.
I've been since we've been talking, I've been trying to put all these ideas into some kind of thing we can develop ourselves.
Yes.
We're still working on. But at any rate, yeah, that's something where if you were, let's say you were setting up a new community somewhere and you wanted to have some kind of very basic transportation, you could make it out of very easy, commonly available materials to do that. I'm actually surprised. About 5 years ago, I heard someone say that by now college kids would be starting car companies in their college dorms, but as you can tell, that hasn't started happening yet. In fact, I'll tell you what, if you wanted to look the project up, the name of the project is Hackrod.
What's it called?
It's called Hackrod, Hackrod. These are gentlemen that were basically working with 3D printing, and they talked about the processes that we have under our fingertips now. The old smokestack factories, I'm actually surprised they're still in operation given everything else, all the desktop manufacturing that's available. So,
okay, so you manufacturing an efficient motorized, form of transportation.
Right, a motorized platform. If you look at Henry Ford's original quadricycle, it had a 2-cylinder engine. It was about 1,000 cc's. It made about 3 horsepower. Well, your push mower has more than that.
Yeah.
That's and that's 200 cc's. So replicating something would be. I mean, we have a lot of off-the-shelf stuff that Henry Ford didn't have available at the time.
Right.
Plus, we have a lot of knowledge to work from that didn't exist at the time.
Well, yeah, it depends on just how far off the beaten path you want to be able to do this. But
there's something, a thought that keeps hitting me. I don't know if you're familiar with James Trent Goodbody. If you know who that is, he's a friend of mine on my old base. Okay.
Yes.
He tried to start a community somewhere out in Nevada, and a big problem that they had. They're out there driving their minivans around, and the terrain is just beating them to pieces. I was thinking, well, in the environment that he's trying to work to develop, that'd be the perfect vehicle, because if you remember the old Conestoga wagons and quadricycles and whatnot, large diameter wheels, lots of ground clearance, and lightweight. So they basically weren't getting beat to pieces by the terrain. It was actually a necessity back then. So that's something I thought he could make use of out there. Was returning to a simpler form of transportation that doesn't weigh 4,000 pounds. Because honestly, you look at the transportation we have now really isn't that versatile. You can drive on a road, highway, whatever, but you're not. I think they found that out the hard way out there, that that it has limitations. And I have a feeling we're probably going to see some of that coming down the road. We're going to be developing our own communities, and who only knows where they'll be and what conditions will exist.
Yeah, I mean, I see those springing up everywhere because, if we have simpler modes of transportation, we got to kiss globalism goodbye. I mean, that's just so inefficient.
Well, here's the thing: we also have to look at, here's another problem that we, maybe all need to brainstorm is our parallel economy.
Yeah.
I personally, I don't want to do a central bank digital currency, so I'm trying to brainstorm what we're going to do when that rollout starts. What are we, we're going to have something in place.
I plan on, I'm opting out of it in whatever way I can. And, there's nothing that says we have to use money per se, but people, I mean, we could hang on to our FRNs really and treat them just as means of exchange. Like we could use seashells, but the FRNs would be easier.
You just reminded me of someone. There was an architect, an engineer named Alexander Wires. He, in a lot of his writings, went into functioning without money. He spent most of his life using everything that he did, where he was buying and selling, he was trading things that he had developed himself. So basically, his whole life was built around barter. So he's a very, very interesting guy to look into. I don't know if you've ever heard his name before, but that he actually patented this bizarre helicopter. But and that's basically what drew me to his name, was the aircraft. But I started looking into his other work, and yeah, he lived his whole life with very, very, very little money. In fact, he avoided using money whenever he could.
I guess he, and we had talked about this at one point, any new ideas, people are going to have a knee-jerk reaction to get it patented. And that's going to be...
We've talked about that, yeah.
Yeah, the kiss of death, not only for the community that doesn't benefit from that knowledge, but for the one getting the patent himself.
Here's a great example of this. Okay, there are a couple of gentlemen that made a rotary engine. I don't know if it hurt me using the name of the company, but the name of the company is Liquid Piston. And what they did, they made a rotary engine that was actually the opposite configuration of a Wankel rotary engine. Instead of having a trilobate rotor turning in an epitrochoid chamber, it was an epitrochoid change, or turning in a triangular chamber. Which, long story short, Felix Wankel didn't want to use that design. Okay, he said it would never work. Well, these guys actually made it work. But the problem with this company is the first thing they did was they took money from DARPA. I'm not sure if you know who DARPA is. DARPA is basically, they're the bad guys.
DARPA, right. Yeah, but explain to people who don't.
Okay, DARPA, I'm going to give a really simple explanation. They're just the money bag for the Army. They approach, here's how they work. They see somebody's developing an engine. And they say, hey, would you like some money to help develop the engine? Of course, all these companies are starving for cash. So they jump right on board with them. And I think as a result, the only people that will ever use that engine is the Army. Now that they have an interest in that engine, you're not going to see it in a car. And it really is a shame, because that engine it has a very, very high power per displacement ratio. They build
that to lay people.
What's that now?
The ratio.
In other words, the engine. In other words, if you have a regular piston engine, puts out 5 horsepower, their engine probably weighs a third of what that engine does. Okay. It's a very, very, very efficient design. But like I said, once you take money from them, get into a contract with them, once you're bound in a contract with the U.S. Patent Office or somebody like DARPA, game over. Right. The game's over. They're basically telling you, okay, here's what you're going to do with your invention now. And
Yeah.
you whatever you else you wanted to use it for, forget it. It's ours.
Yeah.
I half suspect that the reason Joseph Newman's generator was never developed was because it probably already had something like it. That was basically the issue at the patent office. Well, gee, how are we going to patent this? Because the Army already has something like this that we use for whatever reason, and we can't award a patent to this guy for something that already exists. So,
Right.
you know,
But even if it
I
were
would
something,
tell.
you had
I would
mentioned
tell. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
the guy that developed basically a perpetual motion
Well, I'll tell you
machine.
what. I want to throw this out here.
I'm thinking about the water-based thing, water-based energy.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, let's see. We could be talking about Stanley. Stanley Meyer was. He's from Grove City, a little bit north of us. Okay, he's an Ohioan.
Was he
This
still
gentleman.
living?
Oh no. Gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to chuckle at this because it's really not funny. What happened was he patented his device, and he had a meeting with a couple guys on how they were going to market it, whatever. And he ended up running out into the parking lot and dropping dead. And the last thing he said was, "I've been poisoned." So, he announced in a newspaper that he was going to drive from New York to Los Angeles in a car powered by water, which probably wasn't the best thing to do because he just basically painted a bullseye on himself. And his invention worked. It's really not that complicated to break water down into oxidized hydrogen. All you need is some current. And the trick is to tune the electricity to the right frequencies, right voltages, amperages, whatever, to do that efficiently. And I got to tell you, from what I've seen, that's been done 100 ways from Sunday. The only reason people aren't driving around in cars powered by water is basically the lack of interest. Either people don't know about it or they hear about it and, well, that's nice, but I don't really care. And that's like I said, that's the only reason we're not doing it.
I mean, is the technology that would enable that to happen again something that could be disseminated throughout the country? So, I mean, they can't kill everybody.
Right, exactly. That's exactly. I think we've had this conversation before. I first of all, I would never patent anything. I'm not even talking to the patent office. I don't want anything to do with them.
Right. Well, that's what we promote on this broadcast and in our court. We disengage. That's the whole point. We have to disengage from that corporate system.
Well, you see so many horror stories of people who have patented something, and then they either they go to market the product, and they say, "Well, hold on, the Army's using this now, so you can't use it anymore." Now it's a matter of national security. That happened with a guy named Charles Pogue. In 1932, he developed a vapor carburetor, tripled cars' mileage. In fact, the Sherman tanks used them. That we were winning because Germany was their tanks were running out of gas, and ours were operating at a lot greater efficiency with the Pogue carburetor.
Right.
But basically with Pogue, I think eventually they just bought him out. They just handed him a nice big chunk of money. He's like, okay, you can have it. This isn't worth fighting. Go ahead, it's yours. He didn't want to make the lead or gold deal with it. I'm sure you've heard of that before. You can take the lead or the gold.
Why don't you explain?
Okay, the lead or gold analogy is we'll either pay in gold or pay in lead. That's but anyway, you can find a lot of examples of things like that. And I'll tell you what, here's something. If you ever wanted to go down that rabbit hole, there's another gentleman named Paul Pantone. Basically what his invention did, and he stated this right from the onset. He said that Okay, I'm taking our garbage technology and making it more workable. Okay, his position was that all internal combustion technology is just garbage. It's it's obsolete, whatever. But what he did, he basically invented a particle accelerator that you could put on your engine, and what it would do is it would break down whatever fuel you're using and break it down into a plasma. And it's it's basically too big a subject for us to parse here.
Sounds like a nuclear reaction of some kind.
Right. Well, what it is, it's actually it's just doing what nature does. Your nature transmutes different elements and from one thing to another all the time. But at any rate, yeah, that's something. If you wanted to look into it, Paul Pantone. His history is about as interesting as Joseph Newman's does. I mean, and eventually, what happened to him? And this was crazy. He went to court. Okay. And
So-called.
a judge, yeah, just so right, exactly, so called. And the judge put him in a mental institution. And the courtroom is full of people saying, "Hey, this guy's saying I use his technology every day." And but here's a guy. The judge basically put him there because he was making an impossible claim. Well, you're claiming that you can do something that can't actually be done, so you have a mental health issue. That's why he put him in a mental institution. And how they got away with that is beyond me, because the analogy I like to use is,
easy.
Well, the analogy, there was a gentleman named Joshua Cooper Smith who was put in jail for fraud for trying to raise money to develop the telephone. Okay. Because the judge in that case said, well, you're conning people out of money to try to develop something that won't ever work. You just cannot transmit somebody's voice over wires. It can't be done. So they put him in jail. He was in jail, I think, 10 years. And 11 years later, Alexander Bell invented the telephone.
Oh my. Yeah.
I think if I were Joshua Cooper Smith, I would have been going after somebody for the 10 years of my life I lost in jail, or however long it was that he spent in jail.
Well, of course, we know how that works when you're in the right and you're going against an establishment individual. You're not going to get anywhere.
Well, that's why I'm very, very leery of someone telling me, well, that can't work. This cannot work. How do you know? Sometimes with what will or won't work is just a matter of the passage of time.
Well, the whole corruption of any field of knowledge, I mean, as we're discovering, we've been lied to about just about everything you can imagine in every field of knowledge.
Yeah. Well, here's something. You and I have discussed Quora. You wouldn't believe how angry people get when you chuck a rock into their stream of conscious. Hey, this is something outside of what I've learned or went to college and learned, and they get very angry with you.
Yes.
I mean, I ended up blocking a lot of people on Quora just because they came right after they attacked me for something I posted or a question I asked. And I'll tell you what, this is kind of funny. I want to share this with you. I posed a question on Quora. What is the relationship of alternating current at 60 cycles per second with influenza?
For people who don't know, that's what house current is.
Right, exactly. Thank you. I guess I should have clarified that. Your household current is 60 cycles per second alternating current. Now, in 1899, when that was introduced, influenza went from something that happened every 10 years to something that happened every year.
Yeah.
And here
with what's coming out from a couple of alternative doctors too about the Spanish so-called flu.
Oh, geez, yeah, that's an epic story in itself. Spanish flu, I think, was concurrent with either the invention of radio or with radar or some kind of energetic change in the environment.
There were a lot of things going on that were deleterious to health at the turn of the last century, you know, from the war chemicals that were the mustard gas that was used in WW1 and the electrification of the country that you talked about, and you know, the exploding industry, you know, of all industries of all kinds. U.S. Steel, I think. I don't know if that was in that time period. Very, very dirty industry. And of course, the John D. Rockefeller petroleum industry that used the toxins from it to develop a new little side hustle that turned into big pharma.
Oh, right. Most of your pharmaceutical drugs are petroleum based.
Uh-huh.
Most people aren't aware of that. It's a derivative of crude oil. And I got to tell you, you know, I actually, you know, it's been a while back. I absolutely will not use the term fossil fuels because fossil fuels it's a misnomer. John Rockefeller invented the term.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, John Rockefeller invented the term fossil fuels. And basically what he did, he got a group of biologists to say, well, it's carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, so it must be something organic. You know, he got the scientific community to go along with that. And you know, here it is. I brought it up on Quora. Why isn't the scientific community universally calling for the end of fossil fuels or the end of use of that term, that terminology? And boy, do I get attacked over that one.
Well, I mean,
it's an accurate description.
If you want to define, my father was an organic chemist. If you want, and I had always been told, you know, organic just means it's got a carbon in it. And but I think their fossil fuel theory that they crammed down our throats was that it was biologically that there was a biological source to oil and petroleum products, and that's actually not true, right?
No, it's not. Crude oil is a mineral. It's abiotic. Now, I don't have this information under my fingertips. Imagine I could dig it up. But I remember hearing, it was either Nelson Prouty or someone else that talks about these things, said that they told Russian geologists that they were telling school kids in the United States that crude oil came from dinosaurs, and they thought they were joking.
Right.
Wait a minute, you're kidding, right? You know, because here are these chemists where you can make crude oil in a lab. And I'm going to guess they don't have any rotting dinosaur flesh under their fingertips or palm trees from a million years ago. So if you can make it now, I'm going to say that in itself too actually kind of crushes the theory that it came from dinosaurs or ancient decaying plants.
But the term stuck.
Yeah.
And words are powerful things, so though it's a misnomer, it leads to, you know, the false belief that, oh, they have a biological base, and therefore it's a limited resource, right?
Right. That was the whole idea behind the terms. Oh, geez, we're going to run out of it, and the last barrel is going to cost $1,000, and oh my God, everybody panicked. You know, the question that I like to pose to people, if there was any truth to any of this, let's say human beings are causing climate change and we're running out of oil. Why is it that the state has thwarted every effort to use less crude oil? You know, hey, the guy comes out with a 100-mile-per-gallon car and meets a ton of opposition when supposedly there's this gigantic problem that we're running out of crude oil. You know, you got the right hand doing something and the left hand doing something completely different. You say, okay, your behavior doesn't make any sense. Why?
They can't keep their lives consistent with one another anymore.
Right.
You know, not that anybody's paying attention, of course.
Right. Well, the thing is, I don't think anybody looks at anything with any depth, to be honest. I mean, you know, I could find right now. It would probably take me about 3 minutes. There was a gentleman a few years back that won the Green Grand Prix with a diesel car, driving 70 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Drove it 200 miles on 1 gallon of diesel fuel, and it
Awesome.
was
I love
far
diesel.
from the most. It was far from the most efficient platform that could have been developed. Um, you know, since the 1960s, we've had gyroscopic stabilization. You can build a car with two wheels. It can't tip over with very low rolling resistance. It's half as wide as a normal car. You know, the one thing that no one ever pays attention to is the thermal efficiency of the engines. You know, we're talking about, you know, the one thing you notice when everyone tries to make a hypercar or something that gets really high mileage, first thing
Yeah.
they do, they cut the weight down. They cut down the aerodynamic drag, rolling resistance, transmission, whatever. And one thing they never look at is the thermal efficiency of the engine, which is about 6%. You know, if you're going to develop that type of car, you'd probably be better off using something like a steam engine, you know,
Yeah.
or something that actually surprised me that we ever got away from steam. Steam makes a lot more sense than what normal internal combustion does.
But
You know,
don't
a
you have to
steam engine has,
be stoking it with coal or wood or something?
well, you can, here's the thing, you can use gasoline to run a boiler. You know,
Okay.
you can actually have a steam powered car that burns gasoline. And the
Oh,
difference between the gasoline in the steam car and the gasoline in the regular, the normal conventional car is when you burn a burner, that fuel burns up completely. I mean, there's, you know, a lot of unburned fuel leaves your exhaust pipe in your car. If you run a burner to evaporate water, that fuel burns 100%. And there was a gentleman, I can't remember his first name. His last name was Pritchard. Put a steam engine in 1963 Ford Falcon, brought it to the United States, showed it to all the car companies, and you're telling them, hey, look, my car burns 100 fuel at 100%. It has so much torque, it doesn't need a transmission.
oh,
The emissions are, you know, a third of what your car. So why not here? Why I'll show you how to do this. And they said, well, we're not interested. That's basically the reaction.
whatever happened to that man
I'm
and his
sorry.
invention? What happened to that man and his invention?
Well, he made a he eventually made some kind of industrial steam. The thing is, he just got old and died, and that work never went anywhere. Kind of the same with um, oh geez, Joseph Newman.
Yeah.
Joseph Newman. But at any rate, yeah, these men, they, you know, you can find a lot of examples of people who went broke trying to develop their inventions and never went anywhere.
Well, if they, as you and I had discussed at one point, the fatal mistake seemed to be um, to 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 listen to a bar member saying, "Oh, you got to get that patented," and
Mhm.
then being subjected to all that goes with that. And the lure being, oh, you can make a whole bunch of money, or somebody who will pay you so you don't make a whole bunch of money so they can continue making their whole bunch of money not
Right.
doing it.
Or you can die broke and your invention never sees the light of
Right.
day.
But there's a third choice, it seems, and that is freely share this information. And that's really caused me to think about our whole notion of intellectual property, which I think we're probably going to talk about the next time. Um, should we be proprietary about our knowledge? That just
Well, you know,
doesn't.
Keith just brought up Tesla. Oh, geez, you know, you know, died broke alone in a hotel room. Um, you know, and here's the guy that invented alternating current.
But he also succumbed to the lure of the patent, didn't he? And the
Sure.
zillions of dollars he would make.
I got to tell you, the thing that I think ruined Tesla was the Wardenclyffe Tower. Tesla built a tower that would transmit electricity wirelessly. So basically, all you needed was a receiver at your house. Basically, your house would be picking up electricity like a radio signal. And the financier of the project said, "Well, gosh, how do we hook up the meter to this?" And he said, "Well, that's the beauty of it. The beauty of it is there is no meter. It'll be free for everybody." And now J.P. Morgan was no longer his friend. He says, "Well, yeah, I think you're missing the whole point of this, Nick. The point is we want to charge people for electricity. Your invention's going to, and I think he waited to a certain amount of time to disclose that. But the Wardenclyffe Tower, eventually they bulldozed it. And I think, I think that was kind of a questionable idea anyway. The better thing to do would just be to produce power on site at your house instead of having it transmitted. I think ultimately that's the solution.
That does sound better.
Yeah.
It seems like anytime you're not having to transmit product or services, you're going to be more efficient.
Right. Here's the thing. If you look at our current power grid, that electricity has to be pumped up to thousands of volts. And that means it has to be pushed through miles of wires, losing a bunch of energy through heat and transmission loss. When you think about it, the best thing would be to have it right there at your house.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be hard to imagine how much power is actually being lost from having to amplify it to that degree and have it travel across wires. But here's something interesting. Going back to Joseph Newman, the interesting thing about his invention is it required mechanical motion. Basically, it was a motor. It spun. Tesla had invented something, and I have it in a book here somewhere. Tesla made the same thing, but with no moving parts. It's basically just an air column with a field coil around it. I got the book tucked away somewhere, but I'm sure I could find it. But at any rate, yeah, Tesla did the exact same thing Joseph Newman did, except he did it, I don't know, 60 years earlier with no moving parts. And then you have people like Marco Rodin and the Rodin coil. There's another interesting free energy device, works on about the same principles. His coil is a toroid. So, but yeah, I mean, going back, yeah, that's pretty much what ended Tesla. Tesla ran afoul of J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan just basically slung him to the grease. So,
I'm just saying how to make this practical and useful and relatively immune from the expected retaliation from the cabal.
Oh, I would expect that right off the bat if enough people started doing it. Let's say you had a whole town of people using these devices. I'm sure it wouldn't be very long before that town was infiltrated and some trouble came up. And next thing you know, guess what? We need to send this federal agency in there to investigate. Yeah, that's how they usually work.
Right, but that's where the common law comes in, and I think it enables us to pick them off one at a time, because they got to send people to do their dirty work, and that's what we deal with. We don't care how many letters they got behind their name or how many letters their principal has in their corporate name. They're just men and women, and they can be prosecuted. If we had a common law grand jury and common law court, we could prosecute them for coming into our town and doing anything.
Sure.
I don't care what the excuse was. But better, more than one town doing this. I would rather have it be, 50 towns that are doing something like this. And I don't know if we can find 50 people with enough brains to understand what you're talking about in developing effective electrical service for real people.
Well, right. That that I guess the first hurdle would be to develop the one unit, the power of one house, and
Mm-hmm.
once you got that set, once you had it to where it was replicatable, which I got to tell you, I bet with a very little bit of investigation, it's been done. I mean, here's something to process. If I would almost bet somebody somewhere has done this, and
I
they
bet
just
they
don't
have.
want to, and they don't want to tell anybody. Like,
Mm-hmm.
well, hey, let's see, boy, I go running my mouth about this, I'm going to be clever because Paul Pantone was like that to some degree. Paul Pantone, always told the people who followed him, yeah, I'm very, very, very careful about the claims I make in front of a lot of people because I can draw a lot of unwanted attention. But the thing is, we got to get out of that mindset. I mean,
Right. And we got to get away from, I'm going to have this brilliant idea, and not that it isn't a brilliant idea, and you know, succumb to my greed and get a patent and make $1 zillion. We can't don't have the luxury of that, I don't think, anymore.
no,
And
no, we don't.
it's
But
not like the man the man probably who creates who engineers this way of having free electricity, or almost free electricity, is still going to be able to make a living. What they're not going to be able to do is make an obscene amount of money.
sure.
Can we turn loose of that greed? That's the
Well, you
question.
think about it, the question you'd have to ask yourself is, why do I need that obscene amount of money? Am I that bad? Am I that bad at managing the money? I mean, look at professional athletes. These people make God obscene amounts of money, and
Hmm.
their football or baseball career ends, and they're broke. I always thought that if I were a professional football player, I'd work
Hmm.
3 or 4 years. I'd buy a very simple house. I'd have all my, I wouldn't have any debt at all. And then I would have a plan once my career inevitably ended,
Sure.
because it will. You'll either be injured or you just, run your cycle and you're done. Everybody
People
knows who
people tend to
refrigerator.
not think two more than one or two moves ahead, if that.
Yeah, well, I was going to tell you, most people don't think look at the world more than 6 feet in front of them.
Yeah.
That's a cultural problem we have now. I could throw this in there. I think a lot of people would be, if they learned to look at the world around them, they'd notice a lot of very interesting phenomena going on in the sky around them.
Yes. Yes.
We've had that conversation. I know you and I have talked about that, but the thing is, everybody's fixated with the 6 feet in front of them.
Yeah.
And, you can't do that. You
Well,
gotta look a little deeper. Um,
what we're
but
talking about is not for everybody or for most people.
well, it's not right. And I'll tell you what, there are people that actually will resist it.
Oh,
Hey,
sure.
hey, I like living in my split level house and my 19th century car and my diet of junk carbohydrates, and I like this way that I live, and I kind of just want to hang on to it. And I'm not trying to condemn people who work for or whatever they do for a living. I'm just saying most people are, they fall into that comfortable rut, and they're happy with it. I'll tell you what, I'm going to kind of
I
address
wonder.
that.
I wonder if they are. I don't know if they really are, or they just, they're just vegetating and they don't know.
Well, there's that too. I want to kind of
Yeah.
address something Keith just said here, talking about the plastic world. What's funny to me? The whole, okay, if you're technically literate and you understand the composition of plastic is gasoline, diesel, and kerosene concentrated in a solid form. There's a process. I actually posted something about that on Facebook. Remember the pyrolysis post? The gentleman made the pyrolyzer. You basically throw a plastic bottle in it, and out comes gasoline. Which makes me think, what if you went to a gas station and you threw all your plastic bottles in a bin and they gave you credit on your gasoline? boy, wouldn't that make sense? Or, because maybe they could refine it into gasoline right there at the gas station.
Wow, you're just coming up with all kinds of ideas all the
Well,
time.
no, that's what I'm saying. I actually put that there's a handful of people developing these things, but like I said, I think if I had a gas station, I'd say, wonder if we could do that. Hey, bring in a truckload of plastic. We'll weigh the bottles, and however many pounds of plastic we get, we'll give you a discount on your gasoline. You could process it on site, and I'm sure as that became the norm, the process could be refined, made more and more efficient over time. But yeah, we're dumping tons of plastic into the ocean.
Yeah, yeah,
Hey, look at all that energy we're throwing out into the ocean. To there's I think there's a 6 or 7 mile island of plastic somewhere out in the Atlantic, and that's all usable energy. That and the mountains of old tires.
yeah.
We're drowning in a river of energy, and people are complaining. Well, look, we're running out of energy, and we're drowning in it. It's kind of like people walk through the woods and they step on edible plants. They're out in the middle of wilderness lost. Oh gosh, I'm going to starve to death. And they're literally walking over the resource that they could use to sustain themselves.
Well, not everybody is industrious enough to be willing to do that. Or
that's okay. So I guess those are the problems we need to tackle. If we're gonna get around the problem, that's one of the problems. Maybe we need to. I don't know what the immediate solution is. But
you got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere
right.
to do something. And God gave each of us certain abilities, and He's obviously giving you certain abilities and interests that I think it'd be a crying shame to not put to use. And we all have to use what we're really good at. Keith, for example, is really good at helping people recover their health, as he did with he saved his mother from death's door, basically by getting her out exercising. Some people are just natural born healers. Some people are natural born engineers, and some people
I'm going to apologize. Somebody asked for my contact info early on, and I just kind of headspaced it. If you could get the info to him, or I'll get it to him some way. I didn't mean to withhold that. I just didn't think about it at the time. But yeah, anybody who wanted to contact me or through email or whatever, I'll be happy.
Yeah, I had mentioned to you my friend that's a mechanical engineer from Oregon.
Okay.
That wanted to make contact with you, and I gave you his number, and I wasn't sure if it would be okay to give him your number, so I didn't.
Okay. That's just something I had space over. Yeah, I actually did intend to talk to him at some point. I talked to Mike at one. We kind of had a little rapport going on Facebook.
Okay.
But at any rate, yeah, it's just something. Yeah, I think maybe it'd be better if we were all more connected.
Yes.
Or But
right.
at any rate,
yeah. It should happen. I'm hoping that people will wake up a little and contact me about this broadcast. Usually, we get more interest in the rebroadcast of it the next day. But yeah, I just like to see something happening. I'd like to see more people on our court so that we can start building a grand jury too, and because we have the ability to make anybody's creative idea not subject to retaliation, or certainly make it more difficult for the cabal to retaliate against people who are not towing the party line. And I don't know if you're aware of the guy in the organic farmer in Pennsylvania, the Amish farmer, that was selling raw milk and all kinds of great products. And some three-letter agencies, including Fraud and Death Administration and others, jumped all over him and basically, destroyed his business. And if he had just learned the proper, way to assert himself, he wouldn't have had the bar member, intercede. He wouldn't have started succumbing to the fear and started signing documents with the assurance, absolutely, we won't make any more demands on you after you sign this. And of course, that's all a lie. And, he's just allowing them to destroy him. And that's unnecessary. It's all head stuff, though.
Their court system, I like to make the analogy, it's a lot like cancer. It's a lot less scary when you really understand it. People get the news they have cancer, they become paralyzed. Well, yeah, I had a friend that used to, treat cancer with a lot greater success than the medical community. It's not. And the thing is, it's really not hard to find those people. They're kind of reserved about speaking up about it because you've heard of Dr. Royal Raymond Rife. I don't know if you ever heard that name before. Okay.
Yeah. Royal Rife.
13, I don't forget how many hundreds of patients he had and cured every single one of them. And then along came the FDA.
Right. He didn't know how to deal with them.
Right. About had a nervous breakdown. That was his reward for saving people's life. Yep. Keith brought up a Rife machine. Rife basically made an antenna. Now, that should tell people you remember we were talking about alternating current?
Mm-hmm.
That should tell you that disease is based a lot more on energetic things and things like viruses and germs and whatnot. If a man can wave an antenna over you and your cancer's gone, that should maybe there's something a little wrong with mainstream medical theory. maybe we got to take another look at that.
Well, it's like any other corporate business that they got to generate repeat business.
Mm-hmm.
If they were to ever solve the problem, that wouldn't be the case.
Sure, Keith can hear this. Keith should probably check it. There's a book called The Invisible Rainbow. If you haven't read it.
Oh, Arthur Firstenberg.
Firstenberg. Everybody should be reading that book.
Boy,
a lot of things come right out in the open in that. That answers a lot of questions I think people never even thought to ask.
He's still around, and I think I even have a phone number for him.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, the book is very well worth reading.
Yeah, I think he did a study. I mean, it's really hard to do, a study that they will admit is valid in connection with smart meters. Arthur Firstenberg, from Cellular Phone Task Force. And he had asked people to email the New Mexico Public Relations Commission. Well, that's not going to get anywhere about their experiences with smart meters, because they don't care. But the people who serve on the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission might be interested in knowing that there's a group that is interested in prosecuting them for their role in, the catastrophic destruction of the health and lives of adults, children, pets, farm animals, birds, etc., in their communities. So, but this can only be done through, when you're dealing with people. You start dealing with their corporations, and you're just going to get nothing but a runaround and evasions. You won't get anywhere. So, okay. Well, we've been going for a while, and there. One more thing I wanted to ask you about. I mean, it's like electricity, but what about the internet? can we save that from what it's starting to degenerate into with the
You're talking about the Wi-Fi or the Wi-Fi trend, because that's something. I honestly think that's something where if we just had somebody tune some settings or work on the frequencies or whatever, um, well, we talked about alternating current. Alternating current by itself isn't dangerous. It's the frequency, 60 cycles per second. I remember being a small child and walking around in a department store with my mother, and the fluorescent lights making me sick
Oh,
because of the
yeah.
60 cycles per second. So that's just might just be a matter of the same thing with the Wi-Fi routers or the cell phone towers. I think the problem isn't so much the energy itself, but it's the frequency of the energy. I think we could have safe internet. That's I'm not an electrical engineer, I'm not a radio engineer, but I suspect that if we started tuning some of those variables, we could get away from a lot of the damaging effect of it. We wouldn't have to sleep in a Faraday cage and protect ourselves from it. It's just something where the settings need looked at. It may be just that simple, and I don't know. For all I know, someone might actually be working on that. Something
I,
you'd want to be.
I don't have Wi-Fi. In fact, I'm connected directly, into fiber optic cable that comes in my house. I plug my computer in, and nothing is wireless.
You've got the better setup.
Yeah.
you have the better. I would, there was another gentleman who, oh gosh, I'm going to try to go through my mental filing cabinet of 100 names now, but there was a gentleman who basically put out a lot of information about how we would be a lot better off if all of our electrical transmission, if the wires were buried, because just putting them in the ground sequesters a lot of that negative energy coming off of it.
Yeah.
Instead we've got it all bounced around in the air. We're all, we're swimming in it.
Of course, that doesn't protect you from your neighbors who are doing who knows what and aimed at you. But I've been fortunate there. I'm the only one on my street that doesn't have a smart meter.
I'll try to find the gentleman's name. There's a YouTube channel that I watch. It's called Theoria Apophasis. And the guy who runs the channel, his name's Ken Wheeler. He knows someone who's developed wallpaper that basically attenuates the dangers of the Wi-Fi signal and converts it into electric current. I'll try to find out. I don't think the guy will release his name, but yeah, that's something that's actually in the works right now that I know of. So you basically put some wallpaper up and plug it into an outlet, and it grounds all this stuff. So there's
protective things you can do. There's a place called EMF Helps, HELP Help Center online, and a guy named Jerry Day that runs that, and he sells some stuff, including radiation detection devices that are reasonably priced. I have one for under $300 and can tell you where the hot spots are in your house, if any, and what you can do about that. He's got line cleaners and various things, but those are stopgap measures, really. And he admits that the real solution is going to be to find just a better way, and
Well, I'm sure it already exists. It's probably something that already exists. It's just a matter of unearthing it. I mean, I can't imagine, as long as we've been in control of electricity, that there's isn't some way to manage it a little better. I'd tell people, keep in mind too that one form of energy will attenuate another form of energy. For example, I like to go to people who they have something called a sound bath, where they have the singing bowls. And I tell you what, I always feel 100 times better after I leave one of those. And I have a feeling what it's doing. Sound isn't electromagnetism, but it can have an impact on it. It can have an impact on how your cells take those things up. So there's another direction people might want to look at it. Keep in mind that you don't need the same kind of energy to attenuate an energy. You can use sound to attenuate radiation,
And
or whatever.
grounding,
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, right. That's what I'm getting at.
Mhm.
I guess stay open-minded. Stay open-minded. Look at it, and don't be afraid to look at something. I've looked at a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
It's there's more than one path to
Okay.
addressing a problem. So
I think we got to. I'm sure there is. I just think we got to get off the dime and pick one and start.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
I agree 100%. It's just um, I
yeah.
think, but here's the thing. I think what we might be a good idea to do what you're doing. I think that the way you've got your computer hardwired, a lot better than Wi-Fi, much better.
Yeah. Right.
But
Okay. Well, we didn't get to all the different ways, but we kind of touch on them a little bit. There's a lot to do, and we we need to start developing, ways of living outside of the cabal. I wanted to mention too um, there's a town, I think Mayfield, California, where they
mhm,
fired everybody that worked for the local government, and they hired a few of them back. A guy to run the water department, I guess, and maybe somebody else. And the people just took care of it themselves. They actually began to self-govern, and it was actually reported in the New York Times. It was about 8 years ago, and they're still doing fine.
well, tell you what,
The
I'll,
sky
I
didn't
want
fall.
to, if I could very briefly, I'll touch on something here. Remember earlier in the week, we found out about this community that popped up that if we remember, we were talking about that, the community had popped up that was, inviting people to do whatever. You have to be really
Oh,
careful with that.
oh yeah, that was not a
That's
good
that immediately. Well, what I'm saying is we need to be cognizant of that because people will throw at you your heart's desire. Oh gosh, well, I just love to be around all these other people that think like I do, whatever. Well, yeah, they'll get you all in one place, and then you're the proverbial
idea. Yes,
fish in a bucket with a shotgun pointed at you.
and
You
that's
know,
not the only idea like that I've heard floating around the internet. And I'm sorry that I was a purveyor of that, but
well,
better
you
that
you
we
you nipped it in the bud too, to your credit. I mean, I think you were one of the first people to say, "Yeah, something smells a little funny about this." I think it was either you or Luciana did that, or one of you did. But yeah, that's something we need to be wary of that. If it's a little too easy or doesn't quite make sense,
there,
think
there.
twice.
I think HOAs really are, an obscene example of that, where people think, "Oh, I'll be in this community and everything will be taken care of. I won't even have to mow my own yard and everything. It'll be gated and it'll be this and it'll be that." And those have turned into such a nightmare for people. There's another community that's somewhere in Saudi, I think, or an island off of Saudi. And it's going to be gated and it's going to have security. You won't have to worry about a thing. It'll all be taken care of.
Hmm.
And it sounds like an open air prison, is what it sounds like.
Right. Then you have your HOA telling you can't grow aronia bushes in front of your house because they have edible fruit or something like that.
Uh huh.
Well,
Uh
yeah,
huh.
you can't grow that because the plant might produce something you can eat, or they have
Oh,
some other
yeah.
equally absurd rule that you find out about later. You know.
Yeah. I've seen some common law people get sucked into these HOAs, and then instead of dealing with the government, you're dealing with another little, mini government.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You went from macro to micro, basically.
Yeah. Right.
and,
Right.
and a lot more micro. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. We're gonna have to give up our laziness and our greed, and if we're gonna get a life worth living, and to actually be free. Maybe a lot of people don't really want to be free.
Well, I've said that. There's a
They'd rather be
responsibility,
comfortable than free.
right? Well, there's responsibility that comes with freedom.
Yeah.
Now you are a lot more in control of what happens to you, so you can suffer the consequences of your actions more. So yeah, there's that. So
Yeah, we had a question about what's going on with the Texas Common Law Court. We haven't heard much from them. So if they're watching, it'd sure be nice if they get in touch with us. So it's hard to keep a group of people together. Are you moving in the same direction? And I mean, I don't expect people to be like little soldiers, but moving all in the same direction, but still, to understand the basic concept that we can do whatever we like. We're free to do whatever we like as long as we don't cause injury, harm, or loss to someone else. It's just simple. It's the golden rule. And, that shouldn't be too difficult a concept for people to grasp. People try and make it fancy and complicated, and I do believe that simple and decentralized is the way to go.
don't
And that's
reinvent
what,
the wheel. Don't try to
yeah,
reinvent the wheel. That's
right. Well, I think I hear our music very softly in the background. I think
Mhm.
Luciana's trying to tell me something. So yeah, we've been
good
going
strategy.
for an hour and 40, something like that. So
I was just listening, you guys. Very interesting stuff for sure. For sure.
okay, yeah, you should have interjected, but yeah, let's get some people on board to support what Ron's doing, and
Okay.
yeah,
Good stuff.
we're
Just
all
need
very
to
creative people, and we need to apply that to our current predicament.
probably just need a little more connection. I'd say that's the thing
Uh-huh.
we're
Right.
having. But, yeah, it shouldn't be too hard to promise all. But at any rate, I appreciate you letting me speak for the time you did.
Oh,
Uh,
we're grateful to have you, and
Thank you, Ron.
oh,
Thank you
thank
yes.
you.
so much.
Okay. Well, hey,
All
I hope you have a great night.
Okay, you all too, and thanks everyone who's tuned in and contributed, and we'll see you next Thursday.
All
All
right,
right.
Ron.
See you
All
then.
right.
Have a good night.
God
God
bless.
bless you all.
Thank you. You too.